Shmiras HaLashon. We had a little bit of a hiatus, and I do apologize for that. Some of it was caused just by the Yom Tovim. Some of it was just caused by some issues with the Wi-Fi that we had here, or the internet connectivity, some work, which was unprepared for here in the Beis Medrash. But we are back today, and we are continuing in uncovering the lessons of Shmiras HaLashon in different parashas of the Torah. And in today's class, we're going to cover Parshas Vayeshev. Okay, so what is the story of Shmiras HaLashon that we can learn from this story? So when we last left our heroes, we were gallivanting through Sefer Bereshis. We are now in Parshas Vayeshev, and we're going to talk about Yosef and his brothers. What happened? All right. So the Chofetz Chaim points out, he says, all right, let's talk about those guys. The Torah goes into a very long story about what he does and what his brothers do. And we see from the resulting events of this interaction that they eventually are going to go down to Egypt. So there is a lot of the fate of our history tied up in this part of the narrative. And there are also a number of amazing things that occur as well. That basically this sort of is a chain reaction to having them all occur in order that a person should learn from them how they should protect their speech and guard their mouth. It says in Mishnah and Pirkei Avos, this is in chapter 1, Mishnah 13, Hillel used to say the following: Im ein ani li mili. If I am not for me, who will be for me? Okay? So there's a lot that goes on in this. So this statement of Hillel includes a lot of things. Lots and lots of things. And it's very basic level. It's hinting at a way in which a person should be should haste towards doing things to serve Hashem. They should be motivated to do it. We're doing someone asked in this week Parshas Noach. We're doing Shmiras HaLashon, and in Shmiras HaLashon, he is going through the different parshios. So this is chapter 11, and in the previous two chapters we went through the other parshios. But right now we're covering Sefer Shmiras HaLashon, and we're in the current parsha. We take the ways in which we learn how to be careful with what we say from the different parshios. And now the Chofetz Chaim is looking at Parsha of Vayeshev. So we're not doing the weekly parsha. Okay. So we see that a person should be should make haste towards doing things to serve Hashem. And especially when they have the ability and more capability to do that. And that's why it says in the Pasuk in Koheles, this is in chapter 9, verse 10, that everything that you feel that you can accomplish under your power, do it. So the Chofetz Chaim says it's saying with your own strength. And I already went into this more earlier in Shmiras HaLashon, that a person should not rely on their children except for a little bit, okay? That a person should know how to prepare their own house for the proper times when things are needed. And so therefore, the simplest thing that Hillel is saying that we should learn is that a person does the right thing for themselves. He's good. Who else should expect to do the right thing for them? And it's another really important thing that's hinted at in this Mishnah, that I'm sure is going to connect to the story of Yosef in a second. That if the person has nothing done to him that was wrong, who else could do something wrong? For the truth is that everything that goes on in this world, no, Ben Hey is someone else. So all of these things that occur in the world to a person, the good things, the bad things, for a person they actually revolve around what a person himself does. And the thing that we're getting at in these topics is the way in which we eventually, in the topics of this particular story, is how we go down to Egypt. What is the first cause of going down to Egypt? Because we already said that by Abraham Avinu, back earlier in Sefer Bereshis, this is in chapter 15, verse 8, how do I know that I'm going to have someone to inherit me? Okay? And Hashem says back to him, the Holy One Blessed Be says back to him, listen, how you know someone's going to inherit you? You're going to be going down into a country with which you are not a member of it. Thank you. And what the rabbis say about this is that Yaakov Avinu should have been the one who started going down to Egypt. And he should have gone down to Egypt in iron shackles. But in his merit, Hashem didn't let him have to live his life that way. Instead, he went down to Egypt in a proper honorary fashion, almost like he himself had some rulership in Egypt. So the reason why Yosef is the one who brings everybody to Egypt, and he's the one who becomes the actual ruler, and all the other children are are humbled before Yosef, is something else that Yaakov Avinu himself caused through an action. Because what happened is that he gets angry at his wife, Rachel. She says to him, give me children. And if you don't give me, then I will die. And what does he say back to her? Am I in place of God? That I didn't let you have any children, right? That you didn't produce, that you were not able to produce pre-vatan, is what he says back to her. Any fruit of the womb. And the Midrash at that point says that the Holy One, blessed be He, when he heard this response, is that he himself wonders, is this how you respond to people who are in pain? By your life, you are going to have your children stand before her children. The general rule a person should see, and they should be very careful with things that they say. Because with the things that they say, they are going to arrange and accrue for themselves things that happen to you, right? These are self-fulfilling prophecy statements. So if you do things a certain way, those things will come and be reflected back to you. So if you are kindly to others, you'll get reflected kindness. And if you do the opposite, you'll get the opposite, God forbid. So what happens? Yosef brings their evil speech to their father. That's what the Torah says. That's in chapter 37, and it's the second verse. What did he say? He said, he used to say that his brothers were like servants, and that they were violating the principles of chastity, and that they were eating limbs torn from a live animal, right? Violating all these Noahide laws, things that were left to the entire world to conduct themselves. So what the verse is telling us is that he didn't say this to anybody else except to his father. And the intent was for the father, meaning Yaakov, to tell them to be better. And nonetheless, they still can insist on doing the wrong things. And honestly, he should have been the one to have told them that they were doing something wrong. Why? Because the rule of reproving people is a personal obligation. And even that can be done from a student to his master. Think that's again for a second, right? And not to repeat this to their father, because maybe they would have agreed that, all right, he was calling them servants. I mean, it was the wrong thing to do, but, So, but the problem is that their father was married to two servants, And it's not really possible that he set them free before he married them. Okay, and that's why he was calling the children of the. He wasn't clear in the language over here. That's what he's referring to. Right. So what he's referring to is that since Bilhah and Zilpah were servants to Rachel and Leah, then their children would have been technically continued on in servitude. So the answer to that, he's saying now, is that they would have been freed to be like regular children in the household. Okay, and also because the Torah itself calls them Neshei Aviv, the wives of the father. And also, he could have pointed out the wrong things they were conducting themselves with. They would have just said it was a mistake. Okay, and when they think that they were doing the wrong things in their conduct, and they were being unchaste, they would have said, that it was a mistake. And maybe through the book of creation, there was a special book they had that they could conjure things. They created a fake creature, a golem, he says, that looks like a woman. Okay? So all these things that he would have seen, had he had a conversation with them, they could have eased his issues with them. The rabbis say further in the Midrash, this is the Midrash Rabbah. Okay, so we say that all things are weighed out by Hashem. All the things that are weighed out in judgment. This comes from Mishlei, it's 16:11. So everything you get is weighed out measure for measure. Okay, so here's how the punishment was laid out according to the Midrash. So they called them servants. Okay, so because he called them servants, then they should be sold like servants. Yeah. So to be fair, golem was a physical manifestation, but right, it's basically a robot, or even when that runs on an artificial intelligence. They could have been sold like that, okay, and that's what the sale would be according to the Gemara. That's how it would work, and so therefore Yosef was sold himself like a servant. And since he said that he saw them being unchaste, he was accused falsely with Ashes Potiphar, right, of being unchaste with her. And since he also said they ate a limb torn from a live animal, he didn't see them slaughtering it properly, and that was his mistake. And therefore, he has to sit there and watch them slaughter a goat when he has thrown himself into the pit. And didn't eat it alive. And Yisrael, the father, he loved Yosef more than all of his other children. Why? The Torah says it's because he was Ben Zekunim. He was a child of his old age. That's chapter 37:3. And so the Torah is telling us that Yaakov, didn't believe any of this stuff because it was Lashon Hara. Even though Yosef brought it to him, and he only loved him not because of the information, but because of who he was in his life, because of the fact that he was a child of his old age. Further in the story, we see Yosef has a dream. How does this contribute? So he has the dream, and in the dream, he says that he's going to be ruling over them, and the brothers castigate him. Are you really going to rule over us? And so the Torah goes into a very long discussion about dreams. And the truth is that I was trying to actually explain to many of the tribes themselves that would eventually come from the brothers, how did these tribes get to this point? Where does it start? Why would they think that Yosef, or why would any one of the tribes try to replace another tribe? Why would they feel they need to do that? And the reason why is because they felt that one was trying to rule and dominate the others. And how are they going to do that? Therefore, it was through taking this. It was through it was through the tail bearing, a tattletaling. And so therefore, the brothers themselves were thinking that the best thing is for them to remove him from between them and their father, which is how Rashi explains it. That when they said that they were angry about him for his dreams and his words, it's for the bad reports he kept bringing. And he had certain noticeable things like the ketonet pasim, the colorful striped robe. So they thought that meant that their father was listening. They didn't like that, even though we just said he wasn't. And so he thought he was in charge. Okay, and they thought that this was going to be similar to what their grandfather Yitzchak had told their father, right? That you will dominate your brother, and he and all of your other siblings will bow down to you. Okay, or they were just thinking to get rid of him completely, which is what we say early on, which was the curse which is applied to Canaan, which Noach says, he says, you shall be a servant to servants. And so therefore they were trying to look for ways to get rid of Yosef. Okay, so that's one of the bad things that occurs in the Parsha. And now we see how they all end up going to Mitzrayim. So the Parsha story continues, and they are sent out from the valley of Hebron. Okay, why does it say? Why does it say a valley? Because it was deep. The thought processes went deep. Okay, something that Yaakov had considered was that the deepest thought he could have was from the deepest depths, the burial spots that were in Hebron, and the idea was that he was aware that there was still this prophecy of you or your descendants will be wanderers in a land that is not theirs. And I think, says the Chafetz Chaim, that the Egyptians, they used to be the most despicable thing in the land, and they were a place of significant impurity. And so therefore, it was important to have one of the children, the progeny of Yaakov, go to Egypt in order to declare the faith and the countenance of Hashem. Why? Because we see that Yosef himself says that he clearly was put there in order to show Paro the greatness of Hashem. Okay, and he says that to him in chapter 41, verse 28. And also when he talks about circumcision, the idea was to basically say, to cut off their connection to the impurities of Egypt. And therefore that would be safe for the Jewish people to dwell there in their time that they were sent there. Back to the story. So Yosef bumps into some guy, and because he was lost. So the story goes off on this little tangent, but it's telling me something really important. The idea was that to tell something important about being sent on an important journey, which was in this case was the command of his father to go check on his brothers. So how would it be possible that a bad thing should come of this from Yaakov? Because what happened was that the job was done in Shechem when he got there, and he bumps into this guy. And when he went to the other place, it was something that Yosef himself chooses. So when he hears from this guy that they went from Shechem and they go to this place called Dosan, Rashi says the following. He says he's told they went to Dosan in order to that I heard that they're going to come up with different ways in which they could take care of you, like to punish you. Why? Because they assumed that Yosef was dangerous because he just was a constant source of Lashon Hara. And he planted the seeds of hatred amongst them, between them and their father. And they could not fathom the depth of hatred that he had implanted. And so therefore they were trying to figure out a way to remove him in whatever way possible, that in a true judgment way, they wouldn't really be murderers. That they were trying to figure out a way to do it that they wouldn't be considered to have murdered their brother. And if he just sort of like happens to die, it would have been his own cause. He would have deserved it. They weren't worried, and they weren't worried about that. And that's why the Midrash further says that they tried to rally the dogs against him. Okay? Now, you're going to say, okay, well, they said they were going to go kill him. Right? They put him in they actually say that. But they weren't looking, the Chafetz Chaim says, to actually kill him. They were trying to cause him death. And the Gemara in Makos on 23a says that the person who speaks Lashon Hara, he should be thrown to the dogs. Okay? Why? Because we say one should not bear a false tale. That's in Parshas Mishpatim, chapter 23, verse 1 in Shemos. And immediately afterwards it says, right before that it says, L'kelev tashlich chonoso, throw it to the dog, referring to if you have an unslaughtered animal. Okay? The Gemara further says in Bava Kama, this is on 24b, that if a dog comes over and growls at you, there's no damages. Right? However, you should technically be obligated if it was caused by the person. However, by heavenly law, there was no reason to make you feel obligated to some type of damage, because that person himself was one who spread all types of lies and dissent through speaking lashon. So the story says that now Yosef gets thrown into a pit. Why? Well, eventually that was the idea, to save him, to bring him back to his father. That's what Reuven thinks he's going to do. Okay, so this is actually supposed to be a good thing for Yosef, which is throwing him in the pit, because it kept him from having his death caused by the other brothers. But nonetheless, the act of throwing in there was really dangerous, because it had snakes and scorpions in there. But they didn't know that. Because that was the case, then they would have really been killing him, because they knew they were throwing him in there. Because you say in the Gemara in Yevamos, this is in 121b, that if someone falls into a pit where there are snakes and scorpions, they can testify about him that he's dead. So therefore, throwing him in there for sure not be just the cause of his death, but it would be actively killing him. They didn't want to do that. It just happened to be that was the type of pit they threw him in, but Hashem protected them. Okay, so when they're done with that, they take a break and they have lunch, right? Well, we're in the middle of planning the demise of our brother. Let's eat something. This whole planning process makes us hungry. So what the Torah is telling us, that this was part of the sin of the brothers now, because even though they had already stacked up some pretty significant sin points, this one was one of the worst. Because for this they should have been judged for death. Because they should have held it over to actually judge the situation better. And they kept them overnight. They should have thought about what to actually do with them, the proper thing to do, and not to focus on eating. They should have figured out what to do with their brother. And we'll explain later on how exactly the punishment for this was meted out against them. Okay, so we say over here that he's then sold to the Ishmaelim. And at that point here, they're sent down to Egypt. And that's where, that was where the person was seeking to do wrong to another person when they are trying to do something against them, is to basically sell them to somebody else, or to get them out of their life completely. And what Hashem wants you to do is to benefit people. So by selling him to the Ishmaelim, they brought him down to Egypt to the house of Potiphar, and this was part of the test, and he survived it, and that was to his merit. But Yehuda says to his brothers, what do we get from killing him? Let us sell him. And so therefore, with what Yehuda is telling him is through this statement, this was a benefit to them, because then he wouldn't have to die. And there were other negative feelings attached to that as well, significant ones. But they still acquiesced to selling him as a servant, and then they sell him to Yishmaelim for 20 silver coins. And as a result, Yaakov is totally ruined from this. Okay, so there's actually this. I didn't realize how long this parsha. I thought it was broken up into two parts. This is actually a really long section of him talking about this whole parsha. But we'll have to hold it here for today. We are we're going to pick up with the second half of this in our next class, and we'll understand what the significant amount of focus is on this parsha, and then chapter 12 also continues with discussing this parsha, and it's also rather long. I don't know if we'll finish. I don't know if we'll be able to finish it all next time. I would like to finish it all next time, but we will hold it here for today. We'll come back and discussing the role of Lashon Hara in Parshas Vayeshev and Shmiras HaLashon. Until next week, have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.